a feeling that a lot of us in this room are here because we are pretty sure that many things have to change in our food system. We believe it down to our core, but we're not always sure what to do. So let's just jump right into that topic. I'm going to start with the butterfly, the monarch butterfly. We often call these indicator species. Something's going wrong, and we use it as an opportunity to talk about what's going wrong. But I think some of these indicators are no longer just indicators. They are frightening facts that get worse every single day. 1 billion monarch butterflies came from the north, up here in the northern tier, and went down to a certain valley in Mexico. Later, it was down to 300 million. 6 years later, in 2012, it was already down to 60, and 1 year later, in 2013, it was only 30 million butterflies that showed up. So what's wrong? A lot of it must have to do with the fact that there's nothing for them to eat along the way, the devastation of the milkweed. In Ohio, 90% of the milkweeds are gone. Well, if you plot migration right alongside Roundup use and increased Roundup use, the herbicides that's used by many farmers, you'll see a correlation. That's not that complex, really. More and more farmers are planting GMO soybeans and corn that are Roundup resistant. So they use more Roundup on the rest of the weeds, and what a surprise, milkweed isn't Roundup resistant. So we could go on virtually all day with one indicator that's turned into a frightening fact after another. So how do we get here? Well, like everyone else, I'm going to talk about how I got here. I was born in Minnesota, even though I represent Maine, the state where they say, yeah, sure, you betcha. And my family were Scandinavian immigrants and had a dairy farm in southern Minnesota. That's my grandmother in the hat, because every good grandmother should wear a hat out in the field. And that is me, the little baby in the picture. Now, when I was a teenager, I did come east. In 1970, I came across to the state of Maine. I met a boy, and we had a copy of the book by Helen and Scott Nearing called Living the Good Life. So we were intent on being back to the landers, sustainable farmers. We were going to grow our own, live off the grid, and live on the land. I was lucky enough to be able to attend College of the Atlantic, study under Elliott Coleman, who's one of the great organic farmers still in our time. And I started my own farm on a little island off the coast of Maine that has about 400 year-round residents and plenty of visitors in the summer. I sold milk, eggs, vegetables. I raised my kids, started a couple of small businesses. Just for the record, the one with the pig went on to become the Speaker of the House in Maine. So she way outranks me. But anyway, remember that time, 1970s. If you were trying to grow your own food, make sure your family had healthy food, live off the grid, that was kind of a hippie, Birkenstock, not very mainstream thing to do. And agriculture policy certainly wasn't in that same frame of mind. Here's Earl Butz, who worked under Richard Nixon. Basically, he said, plant everything and get big or get out. Well, I'm going to fast forward a little to the 1990s. I was lucky enough to be elected to the Maine State Senate from my district. I served on the Agriculture Committee. In the 1990s, that's 20 years ago, we talked about GMO labeling, irradiated food, bovine growth hormone in milk, but we really didn't get much traction. Maybe we were still considered a little bit on the fringe. Fast forward 20 years later, I'm now a member of Congress. I've served on the Agriculture Committee. I serve on the Agriculture Appropriations Committee, and I can tell you there has been a lot of change in that time. I continue to farm, as you heard. I have a small farm on the island of North Haven. We own our inn, a restaurant. We grow most of the food for our own restaurant. We have a farmer's market, and we sell in a wintergreen CSA. So one thing I know firsthand when I go to make public policy in Washington, people are very excited about buying food directly from the farmer. They want to eat healthy food. They want organically grown food. And they frankly want to buy our greens all winter long as we can grow it. I also know a lot about the regulations and the rules that affect small farmers. So when I have to talk about the issues around raising livestock or how we sell our produce, I can tell you firsthand that when I talk to the FDA administrators, I can say some of these things are onerous, some of them we can accomplish. We even have our own chicken processing facility, and I want you to know I never hesitate to tell my colleagues I'm an excellent eviscerator of chickens. I would say a particularly good skill to have in Congress. Other things I know very well. The farm we work on today is actually over 200 years old, and I'm often reminded that in the 1800s, 1860, New England was the breadbasket for the Union Army. This island, 3 miles by 11 miles, had 79 farms that grew everything from grains to lamb to milk, eggs, and they were shipped to Boston because those were the transportation lines. So when people talk about where's agriculture going to move and how can we actually grow a lot of food locally, we can do this. I also know that what I'm doing on my farm isn't just about me. This is happening everywhere in my state and around the country. More and more young people are coming into farming in our state. We're having a huge revival coming back. The average age of our farmers is going down, and the number of farms under cultivation is going up because the markets are growing and people are really interested. Now, there are still plenty of worrisome trends, and again, I couldn't spend all day doing them. We talked about the bee colony collapse. 25 to 50% of our bees seem to have disappeared, most likely because of toxic pesticides. That's $15 billion worth of crops that they are expected to pollinate. Big danger of what's going to happen in the future. We've lost an enormous amount of topsoil under conventional farming today. We're dealing with drought, severe weather conditions, increasing number of toxics in our ground and food. And agriculture, frankly, is one of the biggest polluters we have to deal with. We are a huge carbon producer, and we're a big part of the problems with global warming. Your average piece of produce today travels 1,400 miles before it gets to your door and spends 7 to 14 days in a truck. That's no way to run an agricultural system. So there's been a lot of talk about the Farm Bill. I've been in Congress for about 5 years, and I've been working on the Farm Bill almost the whole time I was there. We didn't get everything right in the Farm Bill, and we did get a few things right. I introduced a title to the bill called the Local Farms and Jobs Act. And some of the things that we cared about here, which had a lot to do with organically grown food, local produce, actually managed to get through. We got money in there to make it easier to buy food at farmers markets, to make it easier for those people who receive SNAP benefits, food stamps, to get double their return at a farmer's market, to support food hubs, community kitchens, value-added producer grants so more people could put hoop houses in the field and expand their growing season, organic cost share program, organic research, things to help young farmers expand their opportunities to get into farming. So there was a lot of good things. We made ridiculously horrendous cuts to the SNAP food benefit system, and we made those cuts by keeping more money into the commodity food programs, something that we never should have done but couldn't stop. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of what happens with commodity foods, vegetables are called specialty crops. Don't ask me to explain why, but food and vegetables we call specialty crops. And over the last 5 years, we've invested about $269 million of federal money in enhancing what we do with specialty crops. Contrast that with $19 billion into the commodities, corn, cotton, wheat, peanuts, 70 times as much. And I'm sorry to say that didn't really change in this Farm Bill. We got rid of direct payments, but we sort of did a backdoor thing and slipped it all into crop insurance, which you as taxpayers will end up paying for in the end. This is a really lovely picture of the new way we're looking at how you fill up your plate, a great way to visualize how your food plate should look. But I did a little modification to show you what does it look like if you compare the subsidies. So there's corn, cotton, tobacco, that tiny little sliver up there that you can just barely see in green, that's what fruits and vegetables got. Again, taxpayers will pay billions. But I want to talk about a couple of hopeful things that are going on, and many of them have been discussed during the day. We didn't get everything right in this Farm Bill. We're going right back to work on the next one, and public policy is an important part of what we do. But something you've heard a lot about today is the market itself is changing. What consumers want to buy and where they're buying it is creating a real difference in what our markets look like. The enormous expansion of farmers markets has really made an impact in their ability to grow and people who have a farm to sell on a farmer's market. The hottest trend in retail grocery today is local foods. Where did it come from? Was it bought locally? Was it organic? Was it sustainably grown? In fact, Walmart, which is the largest retailer of food in this country, now wants to be the largest retailer of organic food in this country. The only challenge is we don't want all that to come from China. We want it to be grown right here. In restaurants, even the NRA, the other NRA, will admit that the hottest trend is in growing food locally and locally sourcing on the market. And just to briefly talk about the big question about, is this all elitist of what's going on? And of course we have many challenges, but I want to talk a little bit about my home state of Maine. You know, we're 30th in per capita income. We're not a particularly wealthy state. But it doesn't matter if you go in the nicest restaurant in town or the local diner. They want to be able to tell you that they got the milk down the road, that they locally sourced a cattle, that they bought fruits and vegetables. People want to spend what little dime and dollars that they have in the farmer's market, joining a CSA. And if there's one thing I've learned in working on this as a political movement, crosses all party lines. Republicans, Democrats care about this issue. Young mothers and grandmothers want to know that there's healthy food, that the farmers are staying in business, that we're going to have a future in locally grown food. I want to end with one story about what an activist has done. And I know many of you in the room are activists, and many people have their own story around this, but this happens to be one of my favorite. It's about lean, finely textured beef, better known to some people as pink slime. So pink slime was first sort of visualized in the movie Food Incorporated. If you watched it back in 2008, you saw this print of the facility, which gave you a little sense of the fact that they were picking every last piece of meat off of the bone and dousing it in ammonium hydroxide to make sure there was no E. coli or pathogens in the hamburger that resulted, or the additive to hamburger. So if you watched that in 2008, you probably said, ooh, that doesn't sound so great to me. In 2009, the New York Times did a particularly good story about it, adding more depth to it. Somewhere around 2011, so time is going on. Jamie Oliver, one of the great activist chefs, and we're about to hear from Tom Colicchio, another activist chef that really can make a difference. He did a little piece on TV showing people how he visualized this happen, how the meat came off the bone, and what happens when you pour ammonia in and who would actually want to eat it. And he just said, could we just get a label on this? So my colleagues and I, we dutifully sent a letter to the USDA and said, can we label this? I submitted a bill that went before Congress. It said, shouldn't we label if finely textured beef is additive to hamburger? We didn't get much traction. Nobody wanted to hold a hearing around that. But in 2012, McDonald's and Burger King said they're no longer going to put that product into the burger that they sell to their customers. But it was still an additive in school lunch programs. So enter a mom in Texas who said, this is not the kind of thing I normally do, but I'm going to start a petition. The first day, she got 1,000 signatures saying that the USDA should take this off of the school lunch program. You saw the ABC story before that. After the ABC story came out, she had 220,000 names on her petition, and eventually the USDA said, okay, we're going to give school lunch programs a choice. You won't have to take this in order to buy inexpensive food. And the thing that Bettina Siegel said to us, this is when the internet levels the playing field. This is when any mom in Texas who starts a blog can be an activist and can change what's going on in our food system. So I guess my challenge to you here today is, do you have a petition in mind you'd like to get started? Are you thinking of planting some milkweed in your front lawn or your back? More food for the pollinators and bees who might be coming through your neighborhood? Or will you stick with what is also extremely important? Whether it's buying your food locally, demanding that it's organic, that it's sustainably grown, doesn't do harm on the farm. Are you going to read the labels when you walk into the store? Or talk to your grocer about what you want to see on the shelf. Look every farmer in the eye and say, I want to know how this was grown. I want to know what you did to produce this. Perhaps more importantly, look every politician in the eye and say, are you standing up for better quality food, for farmers, for my kids' school lunch programs, for the things that I actually want to put in my stomach? And can I check your vote on that and make sure you're really on the side of right? I believe we have a lot of work to do, but I want you to know I have hope, and I think we can do it. Thank you very much.